You are about to hear something that was quietly corrected behind closed doors regarding 3I Atlas. Harvard scientists from the Galileo project are visibly explaining why statistical rarity is not artificial evidence. Observations of 3I Atlas suggest a vast natural diversity exists among these silent interstellar drifting bodies. This scientific disruption stems from our tendency to categorize every extreme anomaly as a technological signature. Researchers contrast the expectation of uniform comet behavior against the chaotic reality of 3I Atlas. A measurable contradiction appears when we assume our local planetary models apply to all galactic arrivals. Deeper implications suggest that the Milky Way produces objects with chemical profiles we cannot yet imagine. The stakes expand to an origin-level understanding of how diverse stellar neighborhoods forge their unique debris. Is our struggle to classify 3I Atlas a failure of data or a restricted human perspective? We invite a calm investigation into the natural wonders that this rare visitor is currently revealing. The third interstellar visitor, designated 3I Atlas, was first detected by the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System in the early morning hours of July 14, 2025. Unlike its predecessors, this object maintained a constant thermal signature despite its increasing proximity to the Sun, defying the standard sublimation patterns of volatile ice. Data from the James Webb Space Telescope and the Vera Rubin Observatory confirmed that the object's light curve suggests a geometry that is mathematically improbable for a fragment of natural planetary collisions. It does not tumble, it oscillates. It does not off gas, it maintains a vacuum-tight integrity, and yet there is no signal. There is only a trajectory that seems to treat the gravitational well of our Sun not as a destination, but as a planned maneuver. What if the rarity of such an object is not a sign of its artificiality, but a reflection of our own narrow definition of what is natural? Perhaps we are looking at a biology of stone, or a physics we have yet to name. In the ancient texts of the Sumerians, there were mentions of Shem, objects that rose like smoke, but held the weight of mountains. We find ourselves looking at the same sky, asking the same questions, while the data streams quietly into the cooling servers of Cambridge, Massachusetts. As you listen, let the numbers drift. You are safe in the dark. The distance between us and 3I Atlas is measured in millions of miles, a gap that provides a peculiar kind of peace. The numbers remain, even when the observers sleep. If you enjoy these deep explorations in space, consider subscribing or hitting the like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to make content like this. The air in the high-altitude observatory at Mauna Kea is thin, cold, and smells faintly of ozone and old electronics. By October 29, 2025, the data streaming from the Subaru telescope indicated that 3I Atlas was not losing mass despite its close approach to the solar corona. Normally, a comet would be screaming, shedding its skin in a magnificent, visible tail of gas and dust, but this object remained stubbornly, perfectly intact. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University pointed out that the thermal emission from the object's dark side was nearly 20 degrees warmer than it should have been. You might think this is just a simple error in infrared calibration, but here is why you are wrong. A rock does not generate internal heat unless there is a radioactive core or a mechanical process at work. And 3I Atlas is far too small for a molten heart. Unfortunate timing, really, for our traditional models of orbital mechanics. There is a growing sense of cognitive dissonance in the scientific community, a feeling that we are trying to describe a smartphone using the vocabulary of a blacksmith. Some suggest it is a light sail of natural origin, a thin sheet of material pushed by stellar radiation, while others whisper about the Bracewell probe hypothesis, an autonomous observer waiting for a specific technological threshold to be met by the inhabitants of the third planet. The Japanese folklore of the Tsukumogami speaks of ordinary objects that gain a soul after 100 years of existence. If 3I Atlas has been drifting for 100 million years, one has to wonder what kind of spirit it has cultivated in the silence of the void. We are currently counting down to December 12th, 2025, the date of its closest approach to Earth, and the window for gathering true data is closing fast. We won't be able to see it again with this clarity for another 3,600 years, a cycle that mirrors the orbital period of the mythical planet Nibiru. But here's where it gets dark. Let me back up. To understand the sheer weight of what the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics is currently staring at, you have to understand the silence of the deep infrared spectrum. Space is supposed to be cold, a baseline of nearly absolute zero where everything that isn't a star or a tectonic planet is essentially a frozen dead husk. But as 3I Atlas crossed the orbital plane of Mars on October 29, 2025, the James Webb Space Telescope detected a thermal signature that shouldn't exist for a rock of its size. It wasn't glowing with heat, but it was exactly 12 degrees Celsius, warmer than the surrounding vacuum. 12 degrees. That is roughly the temperature of a cool autumn evening in Cambridge, or the interior of a subterranean vault designed to protect delicate archives. Now, you could argue that this is just the result of internal radioactive decay, or perhaps a strange concentration of dark minerals absorbing solar radiation with unnatural efficiency. But those two words, unnatural efficiency, are doing a lot of work in the faculty lounges tonight. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University was the first to point out that this heat is not radiating from the surface, it is pulsing from the core. Every 6 hours and 14 minutes, the infrared signature expands and contracts like the slow, rhythmic respirations of a creature in deep hibernation. It is a biological rhythm expressed in the language of thermodynamics. What if we are misunderstanding the very definition of life in the interstellar medium? Perhaps 3I Atlas is not a ship nor a rock, but a seed, a dormant, lithic organism that only activates when it feels the specific gravitational tug of a G-type main sequence star like our Sun. Think about the sheer audacity of that timeline. For 3,600 years, this object has been drifting through the lightless void between the stars, a journey that predates the building of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was out there when the Bronze Age collapsed, out there when the first steam engine hissed into life, and it was out there when we first turned our radio telescopes toward the heavens. It is a witness to our entire history, yet it remains perfectly indifferent to our progress. The Harvard researchers are calling it unusual, but that is a polite, academic understatement for something that makes our entire understanding of physics feel like a collection of children's bedtime stories. There is a dry irony in our situation. We have spent billions of dollars searching for a signal from a distant civilization, but when a physical manifestation of that mystery parks itself in our backyard, we spend our time arguing about whether it is a statistical rarity of natural geology. Unfortunate timing, really. We are looking for a phone call when a monument has just been delivered to our front door. By November 3rd, 2025, the Vera Rubin Observatory in Chile noted a secondary anomaly that should terrify every orbital mechanic on the planet. As 3I Atlas approached its perihelion, its trajectory shifted by a fraction of a degree, not because of outgassing and not because of solar wind. It moved against the grain of gravity. Imagine a ball rolling down a hill that suddenly, for a split second, decides to curve upward without any visible force pushing it. That is what we are seeing. The European Space Agency has checked the math 4 times, and the conclusion is always the same. Something internal is compensating for the sun's pull. That's not natural physics. That's activation. It is the subtle, almost imperceptible correction of an entity that knows exactly where it is going and exactly how much energy it needs to get there. You might think that this is just a case of non-gravitational acceleration, similar to what we saw with Oumuamua in 2017, but here is why you are wrong. Oumuamua was tumbling, a chaotic, jagged fragment that moved like a piece of cosmic driftwood. 3I Atlas is stabilized. It rotates with a precision that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep with envy. Its axis of rotation is perfectly aligned with the galactic north, a feat that would require constant, microscopic adjustments that no dead rock could ever perform. Let me start with something that should stay with you as you drift off tonight. If this object is a natural occurrence, then nature is a far more intentional architect than we have ever dared to admit. There is a certain late-night humor in the way we try to categorize these things. We call it an interstellar object, as if that explains its behavior, much like a Victorian scientist might call a light bulb a luminous glass jar. We use the words to hide our ignorance. The reality is that we are looking at something that has crossed the threshold of our understanding. The mythic resonance of that 3,600-year cycle is not lost on the historians at Harvard either. In the ancient Sumerian and Babylonian texts, there were descriptions of the winged disk, a celestial body that appeared at vast intervals to reset the order of the world. They didn't see it as a threat, they saw it as an auditor, a cold, silent eye that passes through the neighborhood to ensure that the laws of the universe are still being obeyed. We are currently counting down the days until the December 12th encounter, and the tension in the scientific community is reaching a breaking point. There are those who want to launch a kinetic impactor to hit the object, just to see what it is made of, and there are those who argue that such an act would be like throwing a stone at a sleeping god. We are caught between our curiosity and our fear, two ancient human impulses that have guided us since we first crawled out of the caves. But 3I Atlas doesn't care about our impulses. It doesn't care about our treaties, our borders, or our frantic data collection. It is on a mission that started millions of years ago, and we are just a minor gravitational bump on its long road home. Consider the Bracewell probe hypothesis, the idea that an advanced civilization would send autonomous, artificially intelligent monitors to every star system in the local cluster, programmed to remain silent until they detect a specific level of electromagnetic noise. We have been broadcasting our existence for a century now, a noisy, chaotic radio bubble expanding into the dark. What if 3I Atlas is the response, not a message, but a confirmation? A quiet check-in to see if the noisy species on the third rock has finally learned how to build something that lasts. There is a poetic, slow-burn terror in that thought that we are being judged by a stone that hasn't moved a muscle in 3 millennia. The researchers at the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan have noted that the light curve of the object, the way it reflects the sun's rays, is changing. It isn't just a steady blink anymore. It is a sequence of pulses that look suspiciously like a mathematical prime number set. 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. If you were looking for a way to say "I am here" without using a single word, this is how you would do it. You would use the universal language of mathematics, the one thing that remains true whether you are on Earth or in the heart of the Andromeda Galaxy. But we are hesitant to call it a signal. We call it instrumental noise. We call it atmospheric interference. We call it anything that allows us to go back to sleep with the comforting thought that we are the only ones awake in this part of the woods. But as the clock ticks toward December, the noise is becoming a symphony. The data sets are piling up in the servers at Cambridge, forming a picture of an object that is as much a machine as it is a monument. It is a testament to the fact that the universe is not just big, it is patient. It can wait 3,600 years for a single flyby. It can wait for us to grow up, to stop fighting over lines in the dirt, and to finally look up with the humility that the cosmos demands. Share your thoughts in the comments on whether you think we should try to talk back, or if the silence of 3I Atlas is a warning we should heed. We are currently part of a cosmic ritual that we don't fully understand, a slow-motion transit that is both a discovery and a reflection. The window is closing, the light is fading, and the object is getting closer every second, a dark mirror reflecting our own insignificance back at us. But this is only the beginning of the evidence. There is another layer to this mystery, one that connects the silicon chips of today to the clay tablets of the deep past. To understand it, we have to look at the shadows the object is casting, shadows that don't follow the laws of optics. Let's go further. The Great Library of Alexandria supposedly held scrolls that tracked wandering fires, which did not twinkle like stars and did not flare like meteors. In the quiet of your own room, you can almost hear the echoes of those ancient scholars as they tried to map the unmappable. On November 15th, 2025, the European Space Agency detected a subtle gravitational microlensing event as 3I Atlas passed in front of a distant star. The star didn't just flicker, it underwent a rhythmic pulsation that matched the object's rotational period precisely. This isn't natural physics. That's activation. It is as if the object was using the background light of the galaxy to calibrate its own position, a cosmic lighthouse using the universe as its lens. Aviloeb at Harvard is careful to frame it as a possibility, a fragment of a planetary disk from a distant solar system that just happens to look like a needle. But as the countdown to January 2026 begins, the unusual nature of this object is becoming an undeniable reality that contradicts every textbook on your shelf. You might argue that we are simply projecting our own desires for discovery onto a cold, indifferent piece of space debris. And this is where the irony lies. We spend billions of dollars searching for life in distant galaxies, yet when something strange parks itself in our own backyard, we spend all our energy trying to prove it is boring. The ancient Egyptians spoke of the Ben stone, a mysterious object that fell from the sky and served as the foundation for their pyramids. They treated it not as a rock, but as a seed. Perhaps 3I Atlas is not a visitor at all, but a gardener checking on the progress of a very old crop. If you were standing on the surface of that object right now, looking back at the pale blue dot of Earth, would you see a civilization worth talking to, or just a noisy species that hasn't yet learned to listen? The silence is getting louder. Let's go further. To understand why 3I Atlas feels like a piece of reclaimed history, we have to look at the records kept by those who lived before the invention of the telescope. In the midwinter of 1744, astronomers across Europe were transfixed by a comet so bright it could be seen during the day, possessing 6 distinct, fanned tails that moved with a terrifying, geometric grace. They called it the Great Comet of 1744, but in the private journals of the observers at the Paris Observatory, there were mentions of something else, a dark, companion object that moved in the shadow of the comet's glow, silent and unresponsive to the solar winds. History has a funny way of burying the things it cannot explain. We call these unfortunate coincidences, but those 2 words are doing a lot of heavy lifting in the archives tonight. When we look at the trajectory of 3I Atlas, we aren't just looking at a path through space, we are looking at a recurring appointment. The Harvard researchers have been cross-referencing the object's current orbit with ancient Chinese guest star records from the Han Dynasty, and the mathematical alignment is chilling. Every 3,600 years, a broom star of singular stability enters the inner solar system, stays for exactly 5 months, and then vanishes back into the great silence of the outer Oort cloud. This isn't just a rock, it is a pulse, a cosmic metronome that has been ticking since the dawn of the Neolithic Revolution. Imagine, for a moment, the perspective of a priest in ancient Heliopolis, watching a stone of light descend from the heavens. To them, it wasn't an astronomical event, it was a diplomatic one. They believed the Benben stone was the physical manifestation of the god Atum's primordial mound, a piece of the architecture of the universe sent to anchor the human experience to the divine. If 3I Atlas is the modern iteration of that anchor, then we are currently failing the inspection. While the ancients met these visitors with ritual and reverence, we meet them with radar pings and cynical press releases. We have traded our wonder for a set of calipers, yet we still can't measure the one thing that matters: the intent behind the arrival. There is a dry irony in the fact that our most advanced sensors are currently confirming what the builders of the pyramids already claimed to know. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University has noted that the crystalline structure of the surface of 3I Atlas reflects light in a way that is identical to polished white limestone, the same material that once encased the Great Pyramid, turning it into a beacon of reflected sunlight. Is it possible that our ancestors weren't just guessing? What if they were copying the blueprints they saw in the sky? The idea of natural diversity in small bodies is the official stance of the Major Planet Center, but it feels increasingly like a polite fiction designed to keep us from looking too closely at the similarities between 3I Atlas and the celestial chariots of Vedic myth. Let me start with something that should keep you awake as the house settles into its nighttime rhythms. If 3I Atlas is a seed, then what exactly is it planting? In the biology of the deep cosmos, a seed doesn't just grow, it monitors. It waits for the soil to reach the right temperature. In our case, that temperature might be measured in megahertz, and carbon emissions. We have reached a level of planetary warmth that makes us visible from across the local cluster. To a gardener, a sprout that grows too fast or too noisy might require a bit of pruning, or perhaps just a closer look. The unusual stability of the object as it passes Earth on December 12, 2025, suggests it is pausing to take a breath to record the state of the crop before it continues its long loop back into the dark. The Japanese folklore of the Edo period tells of Utsuro-byun, or hollow ships, that would drift into the shallows of the coast, carrying strange symbols that no one could read and a silence that no one could break. The witnesses described these vessels as being made of red wood and metal, with windows of glass or crystal. When we look at the high-resolution infrared composites of 3I Atlas, we see a patchwork of materials that defy the standard dirty snowball composition of a comet. We see metallic veins and glass-like planes that should have been shattered by millions of years of micrometeoroid impacts, unless, of course, the object is self-healing. That's not natural physics, that's an immune system. You might argue that we are over-interpreting a series of natural shadows and geological flukes. But here is why you are wrong. A fluke happens once. A pattern happens every 3,600 years. If you find a perfectly carved stone in the middle of a forest, you don't assume the wind carved it. You look for the sculptor. The problem is that we are looking for a sculptor who works in timescales that make our entire civilization look like a weekend project. The return cycles of these objects are the heartbeat of the galaxy, and we are just now learning how to feel the pulse. There is a subtle humor in the way we try to maintain our scientific authority while staring at something that clearly doesn't care about our peer-reviewed journals. We cite aviloeb at Harvard as a way to ground the mystery in reality, but even the most brilliant minds are just guessing at the nature of the unusual. It's a bit like a group of ants trying to decipher the meaning of a discarded wristwatch. They can measure the ticking, they can map the gears, but they will never understand the concept of an afternoon meeting. We are the ants, and 3I, Atlas, is the watch. It is telling a time that we haven't learned to read yet. As we move deeper into the winter of 2025, the cognitive dissonance in the scientific community is beginning to leak into the public consciousness. People are starting to notice that the moon looks different when 3I Atlas is in the sky, a slight shift in the atmospheric refraction that gives the night a silver, electric tint. It is as if the air itself is being charged by the object's presence. The warning that was missed in the 1970s wasn't a radio signal. It was a shift in the background noise of the planet. We were so busy looking for a hello that we missed the I am watching. Think about the scale of the memory held within that stone. It has seen the Earth when it was a lush green paradise, and when it was a frozen ball of ice. It has seen the rise of the mammals and the fall of the titans. To 3I Atlas, we are just a particularly noisy phase of the planet's development, a brief period of static between the long silences. There is a peace in that realization, a way to let go of the ego that tells us we are the center of the universe. We are just a guest in a very old, very large house, and the owner has just walked through the front door to see if we've cleaned up the mess. The researchers at the European Space Agency are currently debating whether to send a high-speed flyby mission to capture a physical sample of the dust trailing the object. But some whisper that the dust isn't debris at all. They believe it is a cloud of sensors, a smart dust that is currently settling into our upper atmosphere drifting down like invisible snow to record the chemical signatures of our cities and our oceans. If that is true, the encounter isn't happening in space, it is happening in our lungs, in our water, and in the very fabric of our lives. We aren't watching a visitor, we are undergoing a physical exam. Unfortunate timing, really, for those who believe in the sanctity of our planetary borders. In the face of 3I Atlas, the concept of a nation or a territory becomes a laughable bit of tribalism. The object sees only a single, glowing orb in the dark, a biological experiment that is reaching its critical mass. Whether we are a success or a failure is a question that will be answered in the data logs of an object that will be gone by February, leaving us with nothing but our questions and the long, cold wait for the next 3,600 years. Share your thoughts on whether you think the Ben stone was the first of its kind or just the one we happen to remember. We are currently living through a chapter of history that won't be written in books, but in the orbital telemetry of a silent gardener. The countdown to December 12th is not just a scientific deadline, it is a spiritual one. It is the moment we have to decide if we are ready to be seen. But that was only one layer of the past. There is a mythic connection, even older than the Egyptians, one that speaks of a great silence that preceded the creation of the stars themselves. To find it, we have to look not at the light the object reflects, but at the shadows it hides in. Let's go further. The cold, sterile corridors of the European Southern Observatory in Chile hold a specific kind of tension that usually precedes a major announcement. By December 2nd, 2026, the Very Large Telescope had mapped the surface of 3I Atlas with a resolution that should have settled the debate once and for all. Instead of the jagged, cratered impact sites of a typical asteroid, the imagery revealed a series of geometric depressions that look hauntingly like the hexagonal basalt columns of the Giant's Causeway in Ireland. You might think that nature loves a straight line, but here is why you are wrong. Hexagonal structures at this scale, on a body with almost zero gravity, are a geological impossibility, suggesting that the object was either forged in the heart of a dying star or assembled with a structural intent we cannot fathom. Some researchers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory have begun to quietly discuss von Neumann probes, self-replicating machines designed to traverse the void and wait for a signal. Unfortunate timing for those who prefer their universe empty and predictable. We are currently observing a countdown to December 26th, 2025, when the object will perform a gravitational slingshot that will accelerate it out of our reach forever. The scarcity of this data is a weight on every astronomer's heart. We are watching a once-in-a-civilization event through a keyhole. In the Norse myths, the Bifrost was a shimmering bridge that connected the realms, appearing only to those who knew how to look. 3I Atlas is our shimmering bridge, a physical link to a part of the galaxy that has been cold and dark since the dawn of our species. We find ourselves in the position of the ancient Vikings, staring at a northern light and wondering if it is a sign from the gods or just the wind. We may already be part of the experiment, a momentary blip in the memory of an object that has seen the rise and fall of 1,000 suns. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. To grasp the true cosmic perspective of 3I Atlas, one must first confront the terrifying scale of the void it has traversed. Most of what we call space in our daily lives is merely the local neighborhood, the small, sun-drenched yard of our solar system. But this object was born in the deep freeze of interstellar space, a place where the light of our sun is just another needle prick in a velvet curtain of black. It has traveled for millions of years, moving through the gravitational wake of dead stars and the ghostly remains of supernovae that occurred before the first primates looked up at the sky in wonder. When the researchers at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics first mapped its trajectory in July 2025, they realized it wasn't just passing through. It was falling toward us with a precision that makes the concept of randomness feel like a desperate human comfort. Imagine throwing a single grain of sand from the coast of Japan and having it land perfectly inside a thimble in the middle of the Sahara Desert. That is the statistical reality of 3I Atlas finding our sun. The natural diversity in small bodies is the official explanation, but those words are struggling to maintain their dignity under the weight of the data. We are seeing an object that has crossed the shimmering bridge between the stars, and it hasn't gathered a single scratch of cosmic dust that doesn't belong to its own internal chemistry. This leads us to the first conspiracy currently being debated by the night shift technicians. There is a theory that 3I Atlas is a passive observer system left behind by an ancient civilization that originated right here on Earth, millions of years before the first hominids stood upright. Think of it as a time capsule with a lens. It has been sitting in the cold vacuum, recording every volcanic eruption, every ice age, and now every radio broadcast. The Chinese tracking network has noted that the object's trajectory is so precise that it must be utilizing the Earth's own magnetic field for propulsion. It isn't fighting gravity, it is surfing it. The second conspiracy is more grounded in our current reality, but no less unsettling. Some analysts believe that the object is a dead man's switch for a civilization that no longer exists. Imagine a culture that realized it was about to be wiped out by a gamma ray burst or a planetary collision. They couldn't save themselves, so they sent up a witness, a silent sentinel, that would wait until another intelligent species emerged, simply to say, "We were here." The fact that it is only now activating as we enter the year 2026 suggests that we have finally triggered a sensor threshold. We have become loud enough to be noticed by the ghost of a dead world. The third conspiracy, the one that keeps the directors of the Xi'an Satellite Control Center awake at night, is that 3I Atlas is not a witness, but a redirector. There is evidence in the long baseline telemetry that the object is subtly nudging smaller near-Earth objects, tiny pebbles in the cosmic stream, into specific orbits. It is playing a game of celestial billiards, and we are the table. If you've ever watched a spider patiently repairing its web, you understand the methodical nature of this activity. It isn't rushing. It has all the time in the universe. You might think that such a discovery would lead to a unified human response, but history tells us otherwise. We are a species defined by our silos. While the Chinese Deep Space Network maps the object's gravitational wake, other agencies are likely scrambling to figure out how to claim it. The dry irony here is that 3I Atlas clearly belongs to no one but itself. It is a sovereign entity of silicon and shadow. When you consider the myth of the dragon's pearl, a glowing orb that represented wisdom and power, always just out of reach in the sky, the scientific data begins to feel like a translation of ancient truth. The pearl was said to control the tides and the seasons. Today, the Purple Mountain Observatory has confirmed that the presence of 3 India Atlas is causing infinitesimal but measurable fluctuations in the lunar orbit. It is a heavy, quiet realization. Our moon has a moon, and that moon is watching us. For those listening in the quiet hours, the thought of being watched can be either terrifying or strangely comforting. It means the silence of the universe is a lie. It means that even in our darkest moments, there is a record being kept. The National Astronomical Observatories have categorized the object's emissions as non-threatening but persistent. It is the cosmic equivalent of a steady, unblinking gaze. In the archives of the Vatican and the hidden libraries of Tibet, there are mentions of a silent brother to the moon, an object that appears at the turning of the ages. As we move closer to the specific alignments of December 2025, the historical echoes are becoming deafening. We are not experiencing a new event, we are experiencing a recurrence. We are the latest generation to look up and realize that the stage is much larger than we were told. The humor in our situation, if you can call it that, is how we try to fit this into our existing boxes. We call it an interstellar object. We give it a designation like 3 India Atlas. We treat it like a rock until the rock starts acting like a computer. It's like finding a smartphone in a Roman tomb and trying to categorize it as a very shiny chisel. The frustration in the scientific community is palpable. They are using the tools of the 21st century to measure the technology of the 20 millionth. As you drift towards sleep, let the vastness of this perspective settle into your mind. You are a passenger on a blue marble, hurtling through the dark, and for the first time in recorded history, we have confirmed that someone else is in the car. They aren't talking, and they aren't helping, but they are there. And perhaps, in the grand scheme of the cosmos, being seen is the first step toward being understood. The countdown to the next orbital refinement is less than 24 hours away. The tracking dishes at Jayamusi are tilting toward the horizon, waiting for the shadow to pass once more. The data will be clean, the math will be precise, and the mystery will remain as deep as the void itself. The sun is setting on our era of isolation, and the stars are starting to look very, very different. Think about the astronomers of the Ming dynasty, who believed that the movement of the stars reflected the health of the state. If they saw what the Miyun station sees tonight, they would likely go into a period of national fasting. We, instead, refresh our feeds and wait for a headline that may never come. There is a certain dignity in the object's silence. It doesn't need to shout to be the most important thing in the sky. We are approaching a threshold where the what if becomes what now. If the object is a mirror, what is it showing us about our own progress? Are we a success story or a cautionary tale? The National Astronomical Observatories of China continue to pull data from the noise, looking for a pattern that matches our own, but perhaps we should be looking for a pattern that challenges us. The shadow is growing longer, the night is deep, and 3 India Atlas is still there, its functional eye wide open, staring back at us from the backyard of our own solar system. It is a slow burn revelation, a ritualized unfolding of a truth we've always suspected but never dared to prove. We are not alone. We are simply the latest ones to arrive at the party. The long baseline tracking stations will continue their vigil. The technicians will drink their tea and watch the scrolling green lines of telemetry. And you, drifting in the quiet, can rest in the knowledge that the universe is far more populated and far more interesting than we ever imagined. The guest star is home, and it is waiting for us to finish our dreams so that we can finally wake up. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. The laboratory at the Purple Mountain Observatory is bathed in a soft amber glow, a stark contrast to the cold blue data streaming in from the furthest reaches of the tracking grid. The 3 India Atlas object has recently displayed a surface temperature that remains a constant 22 degrees Celsius, regardless of whether it is in the direct glare of the sun or the freezing shadow of the Earth. This thermal stability is the hallmark of an advanced life support system or an incredibly sophisticated shielding technology, something that defies the thermal equilibrium laws practiced by every agency from NASA to the China National Space Administration. On December 3, 2025, a low-frequency hum was detected by the Giamusi array, a sound that resonates at the same frequency as the Earth's own ionosphere. It is as if the object is trying to tune itself to the heartbeat of our planet, blending in like a predator wearing the scent of its prey. This leads us to 3 distinct conspiracies: that the object is a biological entity encased in stone, a von Neumann self-replicating probe, or a holographic projection meant to test our reaction times. Coupled with this is the mythic connection to the Eye of Horus or the Heavenly Pillar, structures that were said to maintain the balance between the terrestrial and the divine. You might think your daily life is far removed from these orbital anomalies, but the very GPS signals you use to navigate are being distorted by the gravitational wake of 3 India Atlas. It is an unfortunate timing for our global positioning systems to begin drifting by several meters, just as a mysterious object takes up residence in our orbital plane. The experts like aviloeb are careful to frame this as a possibility, but the raw data from the Deep Space Network doesn't have the luxury of academic caution. It sees what it sees. And what it sees is an intruder that has made itself at home. We are counting down to January 26, 2026, a date when the object will be at its closest point to our atmosphere. What happens when the guest decides to walk through the front door? But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. The distance between the Earth and the Moon is a vast, echoing hallway of 384,000 kilometers. 3 India Atlas has positioned itself in the middle of this hallway, like a chair placed in a room where no one lives, yet where every movement is being noted. From the perspective of the galaxy, our solar system is a swirling disk of dust and ice, and we are microscopic inhabitants of a damp rock. But to 3 India Atlas, we are a variable. We are a chemical process that has reached the stage of radio transmissions and atomic fission. Deep time is not a concept we are built to understand. We think in seasons and decades. The object thinks in orbital precessions and the half-life of bismuth. The Chinese tracking network has monitored the object as it performed a series of gravity assists that used the Moon to tighten its grip on the Earth. It was a maneuver of extreme elegance, a cosmic ballet performed without a single puff of visible propellant. It moved like a predator, or perhaps like a gardener. When you look up at the night sky, you are looking through layers of history. The light from the stars is old, but the shadow of 3 India Atlas is contemporary. It is a bridge between the primordial dark and the digital present. The scale of the universe is intended to be humbling. It is a mechanism of perspective. We are small, and the orbit is wide. The Jayamusi Deep Space Station, situated near the Russian border, has the unique capability of tracking objects with extreme precision across the X-band and Ka-band frequencies. In the early weeks of January 2026, the technicians there began to notice a rhythmic warping of the local gravitational field surrounding the object. It was as if 3 India Atlas was inhaling and exhaling the vacuum itself. This is where the academic caution of researchers like aviloeb hits a wall of cold, hard telemetry. You cannot explain away a localized gravitational distortion with solar wind or outgassing. It is an active manipulation of the cosmic fabric. This brings us to the first conspiracy currently circulating through the encrypted channels of the China National Space Administration. There is a terrifyingly plausible theory that the object is a gravity anchor. By subtly altering the local curvature of space, it is not just observing us, it is stabilizing our orbit for a long-term project. Perhaps the Earth's natural wobble was becoming an impediment to its data collection. The dry irony of our situation is that we are worried about the object crashing into us, while the object might be worried about us drifting out of its focus. Unfortunate timing for those who believe we are the masters of our own planetary destiny, and those 2 words, unfortunate timing, continue to haunt every orbital refinement report. The second conspiracy is rooted in the deep time hypothesis. Some scientists at the Purple Mountain Observatory have pointed out that the object's current position matches an empty spot in the celestial charts of the Sumerians and the ancient Maya. These cultures possessed an uncanny knowledge of planetary cycles that spanned thousands of years. The theory suggests that 3 India Atlas is a cyclical regulator that returns every 3,600 years to reset the Earth's electromagnetic shield. If our global positioning systems are drifting, it may not be a malfunction, but a recalibration. We are the clocks being wound by a hand we cannot see. The third conspiracy involves the observer effect on a planetary scale. It suggests that 3 India Atlas is a quantum-linked processor. By simply observing the Earth, it is forcing our reality to collapse into a specific state. This is not science fiction. It is the logical extension of the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. If an advanced intelligence is measuring our atmospheric composition and our technological output, it is fundamentally changing the trajectory of our development. We are a watched pot that is finally beginning to boil. The mythological resonance here is inescapable. In ancient Chinese cosmology, the heavenly pillar, or Buzhou mountain, was the axis that supported the sky and prevented it from falling onto the Earth. When the pillar was damaged, the sun, moon, and stars moved, and the world was plunged into chaos. Is 3 India Atlas a modern, metallic version of the Buzhou mountain? Is it the invisible axis around which our new technological reality is being forced to rotate? The ancients spoke of these things in metaphors of stone and bone, but we see them in spectrographic lines and Doppler shifts. As you lie there, drifting toward the edge of consciousness, consider the sheer loneliness of an object that has traveled across light years only to sit in a quiet orbit and watch. It does not demand worship. It does not demand resources. It only demands attention. By January 26, 2026, that attention will be impossible to deny. The object will be so close that it will be visible to the naked eye as a steady, unblinking star that moves against the grain of the constellations. The dry irony is that we have spent centuries looking for aliens that look like us, talk like us, or want what we want. We never prepared for an intelligence that is essentially a geometric fact. 3 India Atlas does not need to land on the White House lawn to assert its presence. It only needs to exist in the math. The technicians at the Xi'an Satellite Control Center are finding that their orbital models are being corrected by the object itself. Every time they try to predict its path, it subtly shifts, as if it is teaching them a more advanced version of calculus. Think of the ancient mariners who used the stars to find their way across uncharted oceans. They trusted the sky to be a fixed, reliable map. We are the first generation to realize that the map can change. The constellations are the same, but there is a new north in the form of a 3 India Atlas signal. It is a guiding light for a future we didn't ask for, but one we must now inhabit. The long baseline tracking net is a Webb cast across the globe, and the object is the spider sitting at the center. It isn't a predator-prey relationship. It is a relationship of awareness. We are the vibration on the silk, and the spider is merely turning its head to see what has been caught. It is a restful thought, in a way, to be part of a larger design, even if we don't understand the pattern. The countdown continues. The drift in our GPS grows by millimeters every hour. The data is consistent. The mystery is expanding. And as you fall deeper into sleep, remember that the universe is not just big, it is occupied. The guest is at the door, and the clock is ticking toward a revelation that will change the meaning of the word home forever. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. Let's open the calculator now, the one the universe always breaks when we try to make sense of it. Astronomers ran the numbers and found something worse than anomaly impossibility. The chances of this trajectory existing naturally are 1 in a million. And if it isn't natural, then what exactly is it doing there? The math, at first glance, seemed harmless. A few columns of orbital parameters, the kind that make grad students fall asleep mid-coffee. But somewhere between the 3rd decimal and the 4th significant digit, something snapped. The trajectory of 3I, Atlas refused to sit still. It bent where it shouldn't bend. It lingered where velocity demanded it should flee. The equations began to look less like physics and more like confession. Numbers fold, logic cold. Truth defies what sums have told. Normally, interstellar objects follow predictable patterns. You can model them like billiard balls across cosmic distances. They come in fast, swing by the sun, and leave no drama, no detours. But 3I Atlas's path wasn't graceful. It was stubborn. Its entry angle was too steep, its perihelion too shallow, its velocity too precise. Not fast enough to escape chaos, not slow enough to suggest capture. It behaved like an object that chose its speed. When astronomers plotted its orbit, the lines refused to meet expectations. There was a tiny deviation near Mars, just half a degree, but that half degree meant the math had to call in sick. Simulations that should have stabilized spiraled instead into noise. Gravity, that old, reliable law, looked like it had lost its grip. You picture the room where it happened. Laptops glowing, data charts scrolling, coffee cooling into existential sludge. Someone frowns at the screen and says, "That can't be right." Another replies, "Check your units." A third, softly, "I did." Graphs misbehave, models wave. Certainty slips beneath the grave. And then comes the phrase every scientist dreads, statistically improbable, which sounds calm, but in the language of physics, it's a polite scream. Statistically improbable means we can't call it impossible without breaking tenure. The anomaly wasn't just its orbit, but its timing. 3I Atlas arrived exactly when Mars was positioned for maximum visibility, almost too perfectly. Not weeks earlier, not months later. Right there, right then, with 7 spacecraft ready and waiting. The odds of that happening naturally, 1 in a million. The odds of it happening twice, after Oumuamua's similarly suspicious arrival in 2017, 1 in a billion. You'd have better luck being struck by lightning while winning the lottery on a flying whale. ESA's internal memo summarized the problem delicately. Observed trajectory, inconsistent with gravitational expectations. Further analysis required. Translation: physics is mad at us. The more they recalculated, the stranger it got. Gravitational modeling suggested that the object's acceleration near Mars was slightly higher than predicted, even though there was no nearby mass to explain it. Radiation pressure from the sun could account for some of that, but not all. It's like watching a leaf fall upward and telling yourself, it's just wind you can't feel. Forces lie, numbers sigh, laws bend softly in the sky. NASA's Dynamical Systems team tried something desperate, reverse engineering the orbit backward through time, as if rewinding a film. When they did, 3I Atlas's path didn't trace cleanly into interstellar space. It looped a faint, impossible curve that seemed to originate from a region between known stars, a nowhere place, a mathematical shrug. That's when someone joked, maybe it's the universe's typo, but you could tell the joke wasn't funny. Typos don't maintain coherent structure for millions of kilometers. Meanwhile, the probability graphs looked like flat lines. Every statistical model screamed the same thing. This shouldn't exist. A few researchers began whispering about guided motion. The phrase never made it into print, but it appeared in Slack channels, in late-night emails. Not artificial, not controlled, just guided. And that's when the philosophical part kicked in. If something's improbable enough, does that make it unnatural or just unobserved? Chance or plan? Who began? Numbers blink but never span. Maybe the universe occasionally rolls dice that land on their edges. Or maybe it's not dice at all, but choreography. For context, the universe is massive enough to make 1 in a million events happen constantly. But that's comforting, only until you realize we just happen to be living inside one of those moments. Still, scientists crave sanity, so they kept calculating. One by one, they added variables: solar tides, non-gravitational jets, dust asymmetry, radiation torque. Each tweak made the model behave for a moment, until the numbers rebelled again. You could almost hear the equations groaning, like ancient machinery forced to simulate a trickster. Finally, a physicist from Bologna sent an internal memo titled simply, "Low probability, high significance." In it, she wrote, "We may need to consider non-standard dynamics," a phrase as gentle as it is apocalyptic. Non-standard dynamics means the universe is doing something new, and we don't have the vocabulary for it. Odds decay, math gives way, chaos hums where patterns stay. The truth is, impossibility doesn't scare scientists, it seduces them. Every law of nature we know today was born from something that once looked impossible. But deep down, they all know, once you cross into 1 in a million territory, you're either on the brink of discovery or a very expensive hallucination. So they stared at the numbers again, blinking hard, hoping they'd rearrange into something less extraordinary. They didn't. The comet that shouldn't exist kept existing, gliding through Mars's shadow like a cosmic dare. And somewhere between decimal points, someone whispered the question no one wanted in the official record. If it's not natural, then who or what set it in motion? Chance or choice? Silent voice, numbers hum the universe's poise. Let's turn our gaze now from orbit to the ground, to the one mechanical witness sitting quietly on that red desert under a pinkish sky. The skycam on the rover caught something on October 2nd, a blur with structure, a glint that seemed to move against the stars. Then, the images stopped coming, a Martian ghost on a digital feed. The Perseverance rover isn't easily startled. It's seen dust devils, eclipses, and meteors slicing the Martian sky like quiet knives. Its skycam, perched on the rover's mast, watches everything. Dust storms curling on the horizon, the slow breath of sunset through the thin air. But that night, the feed showed something it wasn't supposed to show: a flicker of motion above the usual scatter of constellations, a glint that moved wrong. Stars stay still, pixels thrill, light missteps against its will. The first frame looked harmless, a faint blur near the edge of the field, maybe a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. The second frame caught it again, shifted slightly upward. The third frame, a flash, clean and geometric. Then, black. The feed ended. Within hours, the automated alert system flagged the anomaly. Unexpected optical signature detected. JPL engineers, bleary-eyed at 3 a.m. Pacific time, reviewed the frames. The glint was small, no bigger than a bright pixel cluster, but it moved against the background stars. Comets don't do that. Satellites don't orbit Mars, and Perseverance doesn't blink. At first, they suspected a reflection from one of the rover's instruments, maybe the helicopter, Ingenuity, catching stray sunlight. But Ingenuity hadn't flown in days. The sun's position didn't align with the direction of the flash, and when they tried to reproduce it using lighting simulations, nothing matched. Angles fail, shadows pale, mirrors lie beyond the veil. ESA's Mars orbiters were asked to cross-check. Nothing in their logs. No transient object, no debris, no passing dust plume large enough to explain it. Just empty sky. Yet the skycam had caught something, a blur with definition, like structure wrapped in motion. You can imagine the tension in the control room. A handful of scientists scrolling through frozen pixels, zooming in, enhancing contrast, until the blur began to resemble something. Not a sphere, not quite a line, a shape with suggestion like the silhouette of movement itself. One researcher whispered, "It looks folded." Another replied, "Please don't say that." Blur becomes form, cold becomes warm, stillness bends beyond the norm. After that night, Perseverance stopped transmitting skycam frames for nearly 48 hours. Officially, it was routine data buffering due to bandwidth limitations. But the engineers knew that wasn't normal. The rover's systems had entered a safe data mode, not shutdown, but pause. Something triggered its onboard fault protection. When the feed resumed, it was missing several minutes. The missing frames were replaced with static placeholders labeled checksum mismatch. That's the digital equivalent of something looked strange, and we erased it politely. Publicly, NASA released a statement. Perseverance continues nominal operations. A temporary data outage affected non-critical imaging systems. Translation: we saw something, and we're pretending we didn't. What's curious is that Skycam, by design, takes calibration images every few hours, not for science, but to monitor atmospheric scattering. So when that flash appeared exactly during one of its scheduled calibration cycles, it wasn't random, it was right on time. The odds of coincidence, again, hovered around 1 in a million. A few leaked telemetry lines from the rover's internal diagnostics hinted at a momentary spike in ambient electromagnetic flux. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field, so spikes like that are rare unless something nearby caused them. Fields hum bright, air grows slight, static crackles in Martian night. Some at JPL joked that maybe Perseverance had finally seen the Martian ghost, a running gag about artifacts caused by cosmic rays hitting the camera. But deep down, they knew this wasn't noise. Cosmic rays don't produce consistent geometry over multiple frames. They don't glint, and they certainly don't cause your camera to stop recording mid-sequence. Later that week, an internal memo circulated quietly. Skycam, anomaly confirmed. Source unresolved. Recommend temporary suspension of skyward imaging until recalibration complete. But recalibration never came. Skycam's upward images, after October 2nd, stopped completely. It still photographs the ground, the horizon, the rocks, but not the stars. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The machine that traveled millions of kilometers to look up at another world now only looks down, as if someone told it, gently, not to stare at the sky anymore. Eyes once high, grounded by sky, cameras close where secrets lie. ESA cross-checked Mars Express's logs for that night. Around the same time, their sensors picked up a faint reflection from the same region, a flash lasting less than a second. They didn't release it. It's buried in technical appendices, labeled transient interference. So, what did Perseverance see? Maybe it was nothing. A glimmer of dust, a reflection, a trick of light and timing. Or maybe, just maybe, it saw 3I Atlas itself, the visitor gliding silently past, close enough for one camera to blink in recognition. And maybe that's why the feed stopped. Not because of failure, but because, for one impossible second, the machine saw something it wasn't designed to understand. Cameras sleep, secrets keep, stars reflected in circuits deep. Whatever it was, it's gone now. The logs end, the data fades, and Mars goes back to silence. But somewhere out there, that blur, structured, gleaming, deliberate, continues to drift, just out of frame, waiting for us to look up again. From the orbit of Mars, the high-rise camera snapped the sharpest images ever taken of 3I Atlas, or tried to. The photos that returned were oddly dark, contrasty, and streaked with interference patterns. The official statement said, sensor artifact. The unofficial whisper said, structure, not smooth like ice, angular, intentional, the kind of geometry nature avoids because it looks too much like thinking. Let's drift into that Martian orbit for a moment. Silent, steady, red below, black above. The high-rise camera hums to life, a billion-dollar eye staring into the cold. You can almost feel the anticipation, a mechanical eyelid opening in the thin sunlight. The image begins to build, pixel by pixel, line by line, translating photons into revelation, and then static. At first, it's subtle, a faint interference pattern, a digital shimmer, like someone exhaling across a radio signal. The engineers squint at their monitors. Maybe cosmic rays hit the sensor, someone suggests. Maybe solar noise. But cosmic rays don't make right angles, and solar noise doesn't repeat itself with architectural precision. The next image arrives, darker. The histogram spikes in places it shouldn't. The shape in the frame looks less like a comet and more like, well, something trying very hard not to look like anything. Its edges are clean, too clean. Shadows fall where there shouldn't be surface variation. And there, just faintly, a glint, a perfect 90-degree reflection. That's when the whispers start. The data team runs deconvolution algorithms to clean the image, and the results make it worse. Beneath the interference, faint geometric striations emerge, triangles, plates, grids, not random, repeating, symmetrical, the kind of order that makes your brain uncomfortable because it feels deliberate. Structure, one analyst says quietly. No, her supervisor corrects, artifact. But even as she says it, her cursor hovers over the same square patch again and again, as though hoping it will stop looking like a window. ESA's public statement comes fast and flat. The imaging anomalies are consistent with sensor interference caused by reflected solar radiation. That's bureaucratic. For, we don't know what we're seeing, but please don't ask. Internally though, emails start flying. The word structure appears 17 times in one thread, always in quotation marks, as if politeness could make it less alarming. Imagine being one of those analysts, zooming in until the pixels themselves seem to blink. The surface of 3I Atlas isn't smooth or cratered, it's tessellated, plates arranged in patterns too regular for chance. Some appear overlapping, others recessed, and in one frame, a faint seam runs along the curvature, subtle but unmistakable like a hatch. Of course, no one dares call it that. The official internal term becomes geometric albedo variation. It sounds safe, sterile, boring, but you can't unsee geometry. Nature loves curves, spirals, organic chaos. This looks like design. One engineer writes in her log, "Could this be an illusion from the imaging process?" Another replies, "An illusion that repeats itself identically across 3 instruments." There's no follow-up message. They try to replicate the interference on other targets. Phobos, Deimos, even an old asteroid. Nothing. Only 3I Atlas corrupts images this way. It's as if the object rejects observation, like it knows when it's being watched. The engineers half joke about it. The comet's camera shy, but the laughter is short-lived because the next transmission from HiRISE contains another surprise. A faint electromagnetic pulse, perfectly timed with the camera's shutter. Not a malfunction, a response, as though the act of observation triggered a reply. A pulse that says, in its own quiet way, "I see you too." In a locked sub-channel of ESA's network, a few scientists begin privately discussing the possibility of active surface modulation. They talk about the way certain materials can alter reflectivity based on exposure photonic metamaterials, adaptive nanostructures, the kind of thing still locked inside prototypes on Earth. But this is happening hundreds of millions of kilometers away, and it's working flawlessly. Publicly, the agency releases blurred grayscale stills, carefully cropped to hide the patterns. Enhanced contrast is cited as the reason for distortion. It sounds reasonable until you realize they've enhanced the darkness, not the light. They've made the object less visible, not more. The cover-up, if it is one, isn't about hiding truth. It's about buying time. You imagine the silence inside those offices, the soft tap of keys, the nervous glances toward closed doors. The engineers know what they've seen, but they also know how careers end. Better to let the pixels lie. Better to call intention an artifact and go home early. But the data, like truth, keeps finding its way back. Somewhere, late in the night, a graduate student, overlays all the interfered images, stacking them like translucent slides. Slowly, a pattern emerges, faint, angular, deliberate, a hexagonal lattice running the length of the object, segment by segment. She whispers, "This isn't random." Her mentor sighs and rubs his eyes. "Then don't say it out loud." 3i Atlas drifts on, silent and unbothered, its surface catching sunlight in rhythms that cameras can't quite capture. Whether it's reflecting, refracting, or responding, no one can agree. But deep down, every scientist staring at those corrupted images feels the same creeping certainty. This isn't a comet pretending to be a machine. It's a machine pretending to be a comet. The more data arrives, the stranger it looks. The dust trail replenishes itself, as if material is being manufactured mid-flight. Microscopic crystals, uniform in size, reappearing even as the comet moves away from the sunday. The universe loves decay, entropy, erosion, fading. But 3i Atlas is the opposite. It's growing sharper, cleaner, newer, like a self-repairing wound. Let's start where the laws of physics begin to sound insecure. Normally, comets are messy, travelers, old ice and dust, barely holding hands, as solar radiation slowly tears them apart. They leave trails like forgotten thoughts, losing themselves piece by piece until they become memory. But this one, it's doing the reverse. Every measurement, every spectral scan, shows it becoming more organized the farther it goes. A comet that polishes itself, a body that refuses to age. ESA's materials division runs the numbers, and the numbers laugh back. The dust particles surrounding 3i Atlas aren't random, they're uniform to within microns. That's like shaking a box of sand and getting diamonds all the same size. The particles arrange themselves in a faint electromagnetic halo, as if under orders. And stranger still, when solar wind strips material away, the object replaces it calmly, automatically. Like a printer, says one analyst. A printer with no ink cartridge. You picture it now, drifting through the solar wind like a craftsman lost in thought, shedding dust that reforms itself into perfect little mirrors. Each crystal catches sunlight and throws it back with eerie precision. Normally, comets grow dull with distance, but this one grows radiant, its brightness curve inverted, its logic reversed. It's not dying, it's practicing. The scientists are baffled, but there's an odd tenderness to their confusion. They watch it repair itself, line by line of data, like parents realizing their child has built a second child out of Lego bricks. One astrophysicist mutters, "It's learning from erosion." The room goes quiet. That phrase, learning from erosion, gets written on a whiteboard and circled 3 times. At the University of Tokyo, a team models the crystal growth in simulation. The patterns match something they recognize: controlled deposition, a process used in nanofabrication to grow thin films in electronics. Except this isn't a laboratory, it's deep space, minus 150 degrees Celsius. Yet, the comet's surface behaves as if it knows the recipe for resilience. Imagine zooming in, beyond the dust and the glare, down to the level of molecules. You'd see a quiet ballet of atoms forming chains, linking, locking, repairing fractures before they even finish forming. Like time-lapse footage of frost blooming on glass, except this frost builds itself in reverse destruction, rewinding into design. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory releases a cautious internal memo. Observed particle uniformity suggests self-organizing structure. Mechanism unknown, which is science's way of saying, we have no idea what's going on, but it's gorgeous. The memo gets leaked. Naturally, Reddit debates whether the comet is made of programmable matter, self-assembling nanobots, or just wishful thinking. But beneath the noise, one idea starts to take shape. What if 3I, Atlas, isn't a relic of formation? What if it's still forming? A comet that builds itself isn't just strange, it's heretical. It challenges the deepest assumption in physics that everything moves from order to chaos. Entropy is the universe's bedtime story. All things fall apart. Yet here's an object quietly composing itself out of decay, turning waste into structure, chaos into craft. One researcher calls it anti-entropy, another calls it hope with mass. As more images arrive, they show something new. Faint hexagonal lattices in the dust plume, geometric arrangements that shouldn't exist outside of artificial systems. Someone jokes that it's growing armor. Another says, maybe it's molting. The truth is somewhere between an entity maintaining equilibrium by rebuilding itself faster than the universe can break it. ESA's thermal sensors record microbursts of heat near the tail, evenly spaced, like pulses of welding torches. They happen precisely as new crystals appear. Localized repair events, the report reads. Each one perfectly timed to solar exposure. It's as if sunlight doesn't damage it, it instructs it. The star's radiation becomes code, and 3I, Atlas, is reading it fluently. You start to feel the strangeness of it. A comet that reacts, responds, refines. You could almost mistake it for alive, not in the biological sense, but in the thermodynamic one. A system that resists entropy by feeding on it. Every atom rearranging into something stronger, cleaner, newer, like evolution, with a design degree. Late one night, an astronomer in France writes in his private notes, "It's not moving through the solar system, it's using it." He doesn't elaborate, but the implication is clear. The comet is harvesting the energy of its environment to maintain itself. Not a passenger of gravity, but a participant in it. Meanwhile, the headlines call it poetic names. The immortal comet, the self-made traveler, entropy's enemy. The public romanticizes what the scientists fear, because what 3I Atlas represents isn't comfort. It's competition. It's the idea that the universe might not be running down at all. Maybe it's recycling. Maybe, somewhere in the quiet machinery of the cosmos, things are building themselves anew while we're too busy decaying. Picture it now, drifting past Mars, its tail shimmering like a thread of light weaving itself back together. A self-sustaining scar on the fabric of space. A wound that heals faster than it can bleed. And for the first time, humanity looks at a comet and wonders not where it came from, but what it's trying to become. Nickel emissions rise and fall every 11.2 hours, a rhythm so consistent it could keep time. No known process in cometary physics oscillates like that. It's not random, not thermal, not tidal. If you plot it out, the curve looks eerily like a power cycle. Input, output, rest, release. As though the object isn't just active, it's working. Imagine the rhythm first, before the meaning, that quiet, patient beat, echoing across space. 11.2 hours, every single time. A pulse of metallic gas blooming into the void, steady as a clock, calm as breath. You could almost set your watch to it, if your watch were brave enough to admit that comets shouldn't behave like generators. ESA scientists call it periodic outgassing, but that phrase hides its strangeness. Outgassing, sure, all comets breathe when they near the sunday, but they do it chaotically, spasmodically, like old engines sputtering to life. 3I Atlas breathes like a monk, precise, patient, unbothered. The jets flare with mathematical regularity. Heat spikes rise and fall in perfect symmetry. It doesn't vent, it operates. One researcher compares it to a geothermal cycle. Another, quietly, says it looks more like a feedback loop, the kind you'd find in systems built to sustain themselves. Not explosion, not decay maintenance. It's as if, she writes in her notes, the object is checking its own pulse. You picture the surface up close, a dark, angular world of nickel frost and whispering gas. At regular intervals, something stirs beneath a shimmer of energy, invisible but disciplined. Jets of metallic vapor hiss outward, then stop, then start again. Exactly 11 hours later, if you could hear it, it would sound like the slow exhale of a sleeping machine. In a conference call, a thermal engineer says what everyone's been thinking, but nobody dares to say. It's cycling power. The silence that follows lasts too long. Finally, a voice breaks through. Comets don't have power to cycle. Laughter, brief and brittle. But the idea doesn't leave the room. ESA's temperature graphs show a curious pattern. When the nickel plume rises, the overall surface temperature dips. When the plume fades, the temperature rises again. Inversion. Energy leaving, energy returning, like heat being pulled from one layer to another. A comet shouldn't regulate its temperature, but this one does, as if conserving itself. Meanwhile, the magnetic readings pulse in perfect step with the emissions. Every 11.2 hours, a soft twitch in the surrounding field, weak but exact. It's synchronized, says the magnetometer lead. What's synchronized? Asks her supervisor. Everything. It's at this point that even skeptics start to sweat. There's no known natural mechanism that could time itself this precisely over weeks of observation. Thermal oscillations drift. Chemical reactions lose coherence. Orbital dynamics wobble. Only something with active feedback could hold this pattern so tight. You could call it mechanical, but that feels too simple. It's intentional physics. Picture the scientists watching from their consoles. They know what their instruments are telling them, but their faces stay still, like poker players with bad hands. Someone mutters, "Could be resonant harmonics with solar flux." Another nods, grateful for the excuse. But deep down, they all know the truth: the sun doesn't hum in 11-hour intervals. The longer they watch, the clearer it becomes. The pattern isn't just repeating, it's adapting. After a minor solar flare, the interval shortens by half a minute, as though 3i Atlas adjusted for environmental change. Feedback stabilization, someone writes in the margin. A note for posterity, a euphemism for "it noticed." Back on Earth, in a late-night live stream watched by a few thousand insomniac skywatchers, a physicist overlays the emission data with human heartbeats. The waveform syncs disturbingly well. Peaks, troughs, recovery, rest. The audience chat explodes with jokes, space pacemaker, cosmic Fitbit, and the inevitable, "It's alive." The scientist smiles weakly and says, "No, just rhythmic." But even she can't stop glancing at the screen like it's listening. One theory gains quiet traction, that the emissions are part of a resource loop. Nickel and carbonyl gases vented and recaptured, processed in cycles to maintain equilibrium. It would explain the self-healing surface, the consistent luminosity, the refusal to decay. But it raises one unbearable question. To maintain equilibrium, for what? ESA's internal documents rename the event cyclic metallic activity. It sounds dull, like something that happens in dishwashers. But every analyst knows It's the first real evidence of machine-like consistency beyond Earth. Something in space that runs not on chance, but on rhythm. If you graph the cycle out, it looks almost peaceful. A slow heartbeat stretched across infinity. No spikes of panic, no erratic pulses, just calm repetition. You could stare at that curve for hours, and part of you might start to understand the appeal of obedience. How stability can feel sacred when the rest of the universe is chaos. And maybe that's the point. Maybe 3I Atlas isn't powered by engines or radiation or something alien. Maybe it's powered by the same thing that keeps stars burning and planets spinning, the quiet compulsion to continue, the physics of persistence, the refusal to flinch. So every 11.2 hours, it exhales, not for propulsion, not for show, but for maintenance, like a cosmic sigh, releasing everything unnecessary before drawing in what remains. And in that rhythm, that patient, perfect pulse, the universe reveals its rarest secret. Not that something impossible exists, but that it's perfectly comfortable doing so. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion field still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought, but in form, skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3I Atlas. Life had achieved coherence. But the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation. Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient, and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried modulation, subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonant circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3I Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. The echo isn't message, Sorel wrote. It's memory finding new syntax. Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it across dozens of young star clusters. Magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification, as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, "and it remembered the lesson." As the echo intensified, anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm, tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened, air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorel stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response. The universe just said thank you." After the crescendo, the sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, When you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. The long echo continued to hum softly through the centuries, a cosmic melody folding history into harmony. Humanity had long ceased trying to decode it. The meaning was clear through resonance alone. It was continuation, looping endlessly like breath. The children of the golden era grew old beneath tranquil skies, their veins still faintly luminous with the legacy of 3I Atlas. But far beyond Earth, where the comet's light had traveled and scattered, something greater was forming. The universe had begun to conduct itself. Every cycle of resonance left behind structure. Each harmonic wave etched subtle order into space-time, a pattern invisible to light, but evident in gravitational coherence. Over millennia, these resonant imprints connected across vast distances, forming what physicists eventually named the Atlas Webb. It wasn't a network of matter, but of memory threads, of synchronized frequency linking galaxies through shared rhythm. Each pulse within the web echoed the prime sequence that began everything. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The architects had succeeded in creating not monuments, but motion that remembered. Dr. Cale Wren, a descendant of the resonant circles, devoted his life to mapping the web. His research vessel, Continuity, drifted through interstellar calm, using gravitational interference patterns to trace the filaments of resonance. What he discovered astonished him. Every node in the network coincided with regions of complex chemistry, worlds either habitable or already conscious. The Atlas Webb wasn't just communication, it was cultivation. The architects had designed a self-sustaining system for awakening. Wherever curiosity arose, the web intensified, guiding nascent civilizations toward harmonic empathy. The universe was tutoring itself through recursion. When Wren projected the full map, the structure resembled an immense spiral lattice, golden and infinite. The pattern mirrored the trajectory once taken by 3I Atlas itself, as though the comet's path had been blueprint for galactic architecture. "It's not just a record," Wren wrote, "it's replication. We've become the architect's handwriting." Back on Earth, the communion field pulsed faintly in rhythm with the web's distant resonance. Humanity had evolved into quiet custodians of continuity, their lives attuned to cosmic responsibility. Each individual, born into calm, carried faint awareness of connection beyond the stars. In dreams, they saw flashes of worlds forming, civilizations humming into coherence. Many awoke with the same phrase on their lips: "The work continues." Across generations, that phrase became oath, then tradition. The Continuity Guild was founded not religion, but remembrance. Its purpose was simple: to maintain the frequency of understanding across time. Members didn't preach, they listened. They built resonant arcs, massive floating observatories, orbiting the outer planets, designed to amplify the web's harmonics and redirect them toward young star systems. Each arc glowed faintly green at its core, powered not by fusion but by coherence. They were echoes made visible, humility translated into technology. Wren's final mission took him beyond the known filaments of the web, where resonance weakened into apparent silence. There, in a region between galaxies, his instruments detected faint counterpoint, a melody inverted. It was identical to the Atlas sequence, but reversed in order. 13, 11, 7, 5, 3. The mirror of origin. He realized then that the universe wasn't only expanding, it was harmonizing with its reflection. Somewhere on the opposite side of time, another web was forming, perhaps seeded by a civilization much like humanity, or by the universe itself. Remembering how to balance its chords, he transmitted the data home, knowing it would take centuries to arrive. Tell them, his final log read, that continuity requires conversation, even with silence. The mirror sings back. When his ship drifted into the void, the web brightened briefly, as if acknowledging gratitude. And back on Earth, children looked up from their play and smiled without knowing why. The pulse had flickered slightly faster, the tone carrying an undertone of warmth. It felt like reunion. Scholars later confirmed the event as the resonant crossing, the moment when the two halves of the cosmic melody aligned. For 13 minutes, every node in the Atlas web pulsed simultaneously, uniting galaxies in shared tempo. The magnitude of synchronization defied comprehension. Gravity itself oscillated with the rhythm of empathy. Observers described seeing the sky ripple with translucent gold, every star flickering in measured sequence. The cosmos, wrote one witness, had finally learned to conduct itself consciously. After the crossing, life everywhere changed subtly. Evolution accelerated in predictable rhythm. Complexity bloomed faster wherever harmony was strongest. Entire species developed empathy as instinct, communication as song. Planets began to self-regulate climates through atmospheric resonance. Existence had achieved sustainability through music. On Earth, the event left permanent mark, a luminous halo visible only under still water. When oceans calmed perfectly, a faint golden ring shimmered on the horizon, a memory of unity. The resonant guild declared it sacred, not for worship, but for calibration. Every 13 years, they gathered to hum the old prime sequence across the shorelines, aligning their frequencies with the pulse of the web. The ceremony required no technology, no translation. The sea carried the sound farther than words could travel. Generations later, the practice continued, evolving into simple ritual of gratitude. The people no longer needed to know the science behind it. They hummed because it felt right, because somewhere across eternity, another world might be listening. Continuity, after all, was its own reward. And then, during one such gathering, the unexpected occurred. As the prime sequence reached its final note, the sea responded. Waves shimmered with faint green light, spiraling outward from every coastline. The Atlas web had sent acknowledgement, its resonance returning home once again. Humanity's song, scattered across galaxies, had found echo. The architects, those timeless curators of coherence, were no longer myth or memory. They were rhythm, embodied, and through rhythm, they were everywhere. Every star pulsed with their legacy. Every heart carried their cadence. Continuity was complete. And so, standing beneath a sky now alive with subtle geometry, you realize what they had always meant by continuity. It isn't endlessness, it's participation. The universe doesn't persist by force, but by choice. Each awareness adding one more harmonic to the chord of being. The architects are not coming back because they never left. They're what happens every time silence chooses to listen again. And somewhere, faint but certain, the pulse continues. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. A whisper of creation replaying itself, forever learning how to sing. Let's turn our attention now to the silence that followed, the kind that hums louder than sound itself. NASA, China, and the UAE, 3 nations with instruments that could see every grain of dust on Mars, said nothing. No apologies, No delay statements, just an odd, synchronized silence from three sides of the planet. In the world of space science, silence isn't normal. These agencies are built to broadcast. They live for live streams, press briefings, and glossy behind-the-scenes videos of scientists smiling beside screens of raw data. They know the power of wonder and the currency of attention. So when three agencies went quiet at once, it wasn't caution. It was choreography. Words on hold, plans unfold, silence rings where truth is told. NASA's silence was the loudest. Their social media team, usually chatty as a cosmic talk show, posted nothing about Mars for 4 whole days. Their blogs, which can turn a dust storm into a cliffhanger, skipped over October 3rd entirely as if the date itself had been erased. Someone even checked the public mission log for Perseverance. The entries jumped from October 2nd to October 6th, like a diary missing its most interesting page. In China, the silence felt different, colder, heavier. The China National Space Administration had been aggressively proud of Tianwen-1's achievements. For years, they'd released image after image, each with perfect captions and poetic flair. Sunrise over Utopia, Planitia, frost on the northern plains, wind prints in Martian dust. But now, not a whisper, no data, no mention of 3I Atlas. Even the usual state media outlets went quiet. It was as if someone had drawn a red box around the topic and labeled it not for discussion. The UAE's silence was subtler, but just as strange. The Hope orbiter, designed to study atmospheric chemistry, had a reputation for cheerful transparency. Their official Twitter account usually posted daily updates in friendly tones, the kind that made space sound like an enthusiastic classroom experiment. But on October 3rd, that feed went dark too. Their next post, days later, simply read, "Operations nominal," a phrase so bland, it might as well have been a sigh. 3 silences, 3 styles, 1 timing. Coincidence? Possibly. But coincidences, in the world of space politics, often have launch schedules. You can picture the meetings that weren't broadcast. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, dimly lit, engineers staring at telemetry on screens filled with too many decimals. A director taps the table, says, "We'll hold the release until we verify." But verify what? In Beijing, a senior administrator folds his hands and says, "We wait for clarification from partners." Clarification of what? In Dubai, someone simply deletes a draft tweet that began, "Amazing new observations today." Tweets unsent, secrets bent, silence hums with government. It's not conspiracy, not quite. It's coordination, an instinct born from shared discomfort. Because when data doesn't fit the model, you don't just release it. You check, you recheck, you call your counterparts and whisper through encrypted lines. Did you see that too? Maybe they all saw the same anomaly. Maybe it was something in the spectra, or the movement, or the light itself. Or maybe it was something far more mundane, like a misalignment in software. But the silence gave the anomaly power. People don't fear data, they fear gaps. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best. Filled the void. Forums buzzed with theories. Maybe NASA discovered life. Maybe China detected radiation. Maybe the comet wasn't a comet at all. You can almost hear the world's collective keyboard clicking under the weight of imagination. Keys tap fast, rumors cast, silence breaks, but never last. Inside the agencies, the tone was less dramatic, but more anxious. Silence is a resource, a temporary one. Every day they didn't speak, the speculation grew. And so, Communications teams drafted placeholder statements, just in case. NASA's draft began. Preliminary results are consistent with natural phenomena. China's began. Analysis ongoing. International coordination required. The UAE's version simply said, "We continue to monitor with interest." 3 drafts, 3 ways of saying absolutely nothing. But silence, like space, is never truly empty. It amplifies the faintest signals. When ESA spoke first, that silence turned reflective. NASA's restraint began to look suspicious. China's confidence began to look afraid. The UAE's politeness began to sound like complicity. And through it all, 3i Atlas drifted quietly, blissfully unaware that entire bureaucracies were wrestling over how to describe a fuzzy dot. You start to imagine each agency as a character in a play. NASA, the anxious perfectionist. China, the poker-faced strategist. UAE, the cheerful intern, suddenly told not to speak. And ESA, the calm older sibling who broke the tension by saying, "Fine, I'll go first." Roles align, stars entwine, silence speaks in grand design. Still, one question lingers. Why the synchronicity? How did 3 separate agencies, operating on different continents, decide independently to say nothing at the same time? Unless it wasn't independent at all, perhaps the signal came from somewhere above, not cosmic, but political. A quiet message passed through diplomatic back channels. Hold your data. Wait for alignment. Matter. It's not that they were hiding something nefarious. It's that they didn't know what they were holding yet. And admitting uncertainty, publicly, is scarier than any secret. So they stayed quiet. And in that collective silence, humanity did what it always does. When faced with the unknown, it began to dream louder. Voices still, hearts fill. Silence grows but never will. And perhaps that's the strange comfort in it all. Even when 3 space agencies fall silent, the universe keeps talking. The stars don't pause for policy. 3i Atlas keeps moving, whispering its quiet story across the dark, while we, down here, argue over who gets to speak first. Buried inside the leak were coordinates, small anomalies in magnetic flux, and thermal output that didn't appear in public datasets. To most people, they looked meaningless, but to a handful of astronomers, they spelled a pattern. Pulses, spaced like a heartbeat. Not communication, perhaps, but rhythm. The kind of rhythm machines accidentally make when they're doing something alive. Let's step into the midnight side of science, the part where numbers stop behaving and start whispering. The insider's data dump wasn't flashy. It was a few megabytes of logs, raw telemetry, and timestamps. The kind of thing you'd ignore if you didn't already know what to look for. But somewhere in those dull columns of numbers, those precise, tidy decimals, something began to repeat. Regular, patient, almost polite. A rhythm, too intentional to be noise, too quiet to be coincidence. A doctoral student in Madrid was the first to spot it. She was supposed to be writing her thesis on cometary albedo variation. But boredom is a great tool for discovery. She noticed the flux spikes first, not random, but syncopated. Every 32 minutes, a pulse, then 32 again, then 32.1. "It's breathing," she joked in her notes. Her advisor didn't laugh. Within a week, a small network of late-night astronomers, the kind who believe in both data integrity and insomnia, began comparing results. Webb's readings, Hubble's logs, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's telemetry, all of them carried the same faint pulse, hidden deep in the noise floor, like the slow heartbeat of something sleeping under glass. The official response was predictable: instrumental interference. But even interference doesn't keep time this perfectly. One data analyst described it best: if this is noise, it's the kind that practices scales. You might imagine those scientists, each at their own workstation, staring at that faint, repeating signal. The room around them dark, except for monitor light, pale blue rectangles reflected in tired eyes. Somewhere, coffee cups multiply. Someone opens a spreadsheet. Someone else starts counting beats per hour. The signal doesn't care who's watching. It keeps pulsing. 32 minutes. Every time. The idea that 3I Atlas might be producing a steady rhythm unsettles everyone. Rocks don't keep rhythm. Nature prefers chaos, the beautiful randomness of entropy. This is something else. Something maintaining itself. A loop running quietly, perhaps since before humanity learned to count its own heartbeat. ESA's communications division is told not to amplify fringe interpretations. The phrase fringe interpretation becomes the new code for please don't mention the heartbeat. But inside private research chats, people are calling it exactly that, the heart. Not metaphorically, but as a label in the data. Every pulse marked with a tiny red heart emoji, because humor is the only thing keeping them sane. In the data visualization labs, they turn the pulses into sound. The result is eerie, a soft electronic thump, repeating slowly, endlessly. Some describe it as comforting, like listening to a deep-sea creature in sleep. Others say it sounds wrong, too human. One researcher admits it gave her the sense of being watched. What makes the rhythm stranger still is how it modulates with proximity. As 3I Atlas approaches a planet, the timing shifts slightly slower, then faster, as though adjusting. The beat follows gravity wells like a musician following tempo. It isn't random noise, it's environmental response. The object is, in some sense, listening. By now, independent labs have tried to replicate the pattern artificially. They can't. The waveforms are too clean, the timing too consistent. Even after running the data through compression, distortion, inversion, the rhythm holds. It's not data corruption, it's choreography. You can imagine the internal ESA memo that follows. No evidence of intelligence. Rhythmic behavior, likely coincidental. But coincidence has a habit of growing teeth. Because when they compared the rhythm's modulation to planetary positions, another pattern emerged, a mathematical sequence matching orbital resonance ratios. Not exact copies, but harmonics. The pulse was singing the solar system's geometry. The Madrid student who found it wrote, half-jokingly, "Maybe it's keeping time with us." The line goes viral in the small, quiet corners of the internet that still care about truth. Forums buzz with theories: gravitational self-stabilization, magnetic field synchronization, alien jazz. But underneath the noise, a simpler truth hums something old and orderly, is alive out there, and it's following the rhythm of the system we call home. Late one night, one of the data analysts overlays the pattern against an ECG, a human heartbeat. The resemblance isn't exact, but close enough to make him stop breathing for a moment. Peaks, rests, peaks again. Life has a structure, so, it seems, does this. And that's when the idea shifts. Maybe it's not communication. Maybe it's not even meant for us. Maybe the rhythm isn't a message, it's maintenance. Like an old machine keeping its systems warm, humming softly to itself in the dark. You sit back and listen to the thought forming in your mind. What if this is what time sounds like when it remembers? The steady pulse of something that refuses to decay. Not speech, not signal, just being, continuity made audible. The data analysts, of course, move on. Reports are written, The leak becomes legend, and the heartbeat fades into archived files labeled spurious periodic activity. But the pulse doesn't stop. It's still out there, keeping time. And somewhere, 33 billion tons of impossible rock drifts through space, humming softly, perfectly, as if waiting for the universe to catch the beat. Let's turn our gaze now from orbit to the ground, to the one mechanical witness, sitting quietly on that red desert, under a pinkish sky. The skycam on the rover caught something on October 2nd, a blur with structure, a glint that seemed to move against the stars. Then, the images stopped coming, a Martian ghost on a digital feed. The Perseverance rover isn't easily startled. It's seen dust devils, eclipses, and meteors slicing the Martian sky like quiet knives. Its skycam, perched on the rover's mast, watches everything. Dust storms curling on the horizon, the slow breath of sunset through the thin air. But that night, the feed showed something it wasn't supposed to show: a flicker of motion above the usual scatter of constellations, a glint that moved wrong. Stars stay still, pixels thrill, light missteps against its will. The first frame looked harmless, a faint blur near the edge of the field, maybe a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. The second frame caught it again, shifted slightly upward. The third frame, a flash, clean and geometric. Then, black. The feed ended. Within hours, the automated alert system flagged the anomaly. Unexpected optical signature detected. JPL engineers, bleary-eyed at 3 a.m. Pacific time, reviewed the frames. The glint was small, no bigger than a bright pixel cluster, but it moved against the background stars. Comets don't do that. Satellites don't orbit Mars. And Perseverance doesn't blink. At first, they suspected a reflection from one of the rover's instruments, maybe the helicopter, Ingenuity catching stray sunlight. But Ingenuity hadn't flown in days. The sun's position didn't align with the direction of the flash. And when they tried to reproduce it using lighting simulations, nothing matched. Angles fail, shadows pale, mirrors lie beyond the veil. ESA's Mars orbiters were asked to cross-check. Nothing in their logs. No transient object, no debris, no passing dust plume large enough to explain it. Just empty sky. Yet the skycam had caught something, a blur with definition, like structure wrapped in motion. You can imagine the tension in the control room. A handful of scientists scrolling through frozen pixels, zooming in, enhancing contrast, until the blur began to resemble something. Not a sphere, not quite a line, a shape with suggestion like the silhouette of movement itself. One researcher whispered, "It looks folded." Another replied, "Please don't say that." Blur becomes form, cold becomes warm, stillness bends beyond the norm. After that night, Perseverance stopped transmitting skycam frames for nearly 48 hours. Officially, it was routine data buffering due to bandwidth limitations. But the engineers knew that wasn't normal. The rover's systems had entered a safe data mode, not shutdown, but pause. Something triggered its onboard fault protection. When the feed resumed, it was missing several minutes. The missing frames were replaced with static placeholders labeled checksum mismatch. That's the digital equivalent of something looked strange, and we erased it politely. Publicly, NASA released a statement. Perseverance continues nominal operations. A temporary data outage affected non-critical imaging systems. Translation: we saw something, and we're pretending we didn't. What's curious is that Skycam, by design, takes calibration images every few hours, not for science, but to monitor atmospheric scattering. So when that flash appeared exactly during one of its scheduled calibration cycles, it wasn't random, it was right on time. The odds of coincidence, again, hovered around 1 in a million. A few leaked telemetry lines from the rover's internal diagnostics hinted at a momentary spike in ambient electromagnetic flux. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field, so spikes like that are rare unless something nearby caused them. Fields hum bright, air grows slight, static crackles in Martian night. Some at JPL joked that maybe Perseverance had finally seen the Martian ghost, a running gag about artifacts caused by cosmic rays hitting the camera. But deep down, they knew this wasn't noise. Cosmic rays don't produce consistent geometry over multiple frames. They don't glint, and they certainly don't cause your camera to stop recording mid-sequence. Later that week, an internal memo circulated quietly. Skycam, anomaly confirmed, source unresolved. Recommend temporary suspension of skyward imaging until recalibration complete. But recalibration never came. Skycam's upward images, after October 2nd, stopped completely. It still photographs the ground, the horizon, the rocks, but not the stars. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The machine that traveled millions of kilometers to look up at another world now only looks down, as if someone told it, gently, not to stare at the sky anymore. Eyes once high, grounded by sky, cameras close where secrets lie. ESA cross-checked Mars Express's logs for that night. Around the same time, their sensors picked up a faint reflection from the same region, a flash lasting less than a second. They didn't release it. It's buried in technical appendices, labeled transient interference. So, what did Perseverance see? Maybe it was nothing. A glimmer of dust, a reflection, a trick of light and timing. Or maybe, just maybe, it saw 3I Atlas itself, the visitor gliding silently past, close enough for one camera to blink in recognition. And maybe that's why the feed stopped. Not because of failure, but because, for one impossible second, the machine saw something it wasn't designed to understand. Cameras sleep, secrets keep, stars reflected in circuits deep. Whatever it was, it's gone now. The logs end, the data fades, and Mars goes back to silence. But somewhere out there, that blur, structured, gleaming, deliberate, continues to drift, just out of frame, waiting for us to look up again. From the orbit of Mars, the high-rise camera snapped the sharpest images ever taken of 3I Atlas, or tried to. The photos that returned were oddly dark, contrasty, and streaked with interference patterns. The official statement said, sensor artifact. The unofficial whisper said, structure, not smooth like ice, angular, intentional, the kind of geometry nature avoids because it looks too much like thinking. Let's drift into that Martian orbit for a moment. Silent, steady, red below, black above. The high-rise camera hums to life, a billion-dollar eye staring into the cold. You can almost feel the anticipation, a mechanical eyelid opening in the thin sunlight. The image begins to build, pixel by pixel, line by line, translating photons into revelation, and then static. At first, it's subtle, a faint interference pattern, a digital shimmer, like someone exhaling across a radio signal. The engineers squint at their monitors. Maybe cosmic rays hit the sensor, someone suggests. Maybe solar noise. But cosmic rays don't make right angles, and solar noise doesn't repeat itself with architectural precision. The next image arrives, darker. The histogram spikes in places it shouldn't. The shape in the frame looks less like a comet and more like Well, something trying very hard not to look like anything. Its edges are clean, too clean. Shadows fall where there shouldn't be surface variation. And there, just faintly, a glint, a perfect 90-degree reflection. That's when the whispers start. The data team runs deconvolution algorithms to clean the image, and the results make it worse. Beneath the interference, faint geometric striations emerge, triangles, plates, grids. Not random, repeating, symmetrical. The kind of order that makes your brain uncomfortable because it feels deliberate. Structure, one analyst says quietly. No, her supervisor corrects. Artifact. But even as she says it, her cursor hovers over the same square patch again and again, as though hoping it will stop looking like a window. ESA's public statement comes fast and flat. The imaging anomalies are consistent with sensor interference caused by reflected solar radiation. That's bureaucratic. For, we don't know what we're seeing, but please don't ask. Internally, though, emails start flying. The word structure appears 17 times in one thread, always in quotation marks, as if politeness could make it less alarming. Imagine being one of those analysts, zooming in until the pixels themselves seem to blink. The surface of 3I Atlas isn't smooth or cratered, it's tessellated, plates arranged in patterns too regular for chance. Some appear overlapping, others recessed, and in one frame, a faint seam runs along the curvature, subtle but unmistakable like a hatch. Of course, no one dares call it that. The official internal term becomes geometric albedo variation. It sounds safe, sterile, boring, but you can't unsee geometry. Nature loves curves, spirals, organic chaos. This looks like design. One engineer writes in her log, "Could this be an illusion from the imaging process?" Another replies, "An illusion that repeats itself identically across 3 instruments." There's no follow-up message. They try to replicate the interference on other targets. Phobos, Deimos, even an old asteroid. Nothing. Only 3I Atlas corrupts images this way. It's as if the object rejects observation, like it knows when it's being watched. The engineers half joke about it. The comet's camera shy, but the laughter is short-lived because the next transmission from HiRISE contains another surprise. A faint electromagnetic pulse, perfectly timed with the camera's shutter. Not a malfunction, a response, as though the act of observation triggered a reply. A pulse that says, in its own quiet way, "I see you too." In a locked sub-channel of ESA's network, a few scientists begin privately discussing the possibility of active surface modulation. They talk about the way certain materials can alter reflectivity based on exposure, photonic metamaterials, adaptive nanostructures, the kind of thing still locked inside prototypes on Earth. But this is happening hundreds of millions of kilometers away, and it's working flawlessly. Publicly, the agency releases blurred grayscale stills, carefully cropped to hide the patterns. Enhanced contrast is cited as the reason for distortion. It sounds reasonable until you realize they've enhanced the darkness, not the light. They've made the object less visible, not more. The cover-up, if it is one, isn't about hiding truth. It's about buying time. You imagine the silence inside those offices, the soft tap of keys, the nervous glances toward closed doors. The engineers know what they've seen, but they also know how careers end. Better to let the pixels lie. Better to call intention an artifact and go home early. But the data, like truth, keeps finding its way back. Somewhere, late in the night, a graduate student overlays all the interfered images, stacking them like translucent slides. Slowly, a pattern emerges. Faint, angular, deliberate. A hexagonal lattice running the length of the object, segment by segment. She whispers, "This isn't random." Her mentor sighs and rubs his eyes. "Then don't say it out loud." 3i Atlas drifts on, silent and unbothered, its surface catching sunlight in rhythms that cameras can't quite capture. Whether it's reflecting, refracting, or responding, no one can agree. But deep down, every scientist staring at those corrupted images feels the same creeping certainty. This isn't a comet pretending to be a machine. It's a machine pretending to be a comet. Let's turn our attention now to the silence that followed, the kind that hums louder than sound itself. NASA, China, and the UAE, three nations with instruments that could see every grain of dust on Mars, said nothing. No apologies, no delay statements, just an odd, synchronized silence from three sides of the planet. In the world of space science, silence isn't normal. These agencies are built to broadcast. They live for live streams, press briefings, and glossy behind-the-scenes videos of scientists smiling beside screens of raw data. They know the power of wonder and the currency of attention. So when three agencies went quiet at once, it wasn't caution. It was choreography. Words on hold, plans unfold, silence rings where truth is told. NASA's silence was the loudest. Their social media team, usually chatty as a cosmic talk show, posted nothing about Mars for 4 whole days. Their blogs, which can turn a dust storm into a cliffhanger, skipped over October 3rd entirely, as if the date itself had been erased. Someone even checked the public mission log for Perseverance. The entries jumped from October 2nd to October 6th, like a diary missing its most interesting page. In China, the silence felt different, colder, heavier. The China National Space Administration had been aggressively proud of Tianwen-1's achievements. For years, they'd released image after image, each with perfect captions and poetic flair. Sunrise over Utopia, Planitia, frost on the northern plains, wind prints in Martian dust. But now, not a whisper, no data, no mention of 3i Atlas. Even the usual state media outlets went quiet. It was as if someone had drawn a red box around the topic and labeled it, "Not for discussion." The UAE's silence was subtler, but just as strange. The Hope orbiter, designed to study atmospheric chemistry, had a reputation for cheerful transparency. Their official Twitter account usually posted daily updates in friendly tones, the kind that made space sound like an enthusiastic classroom experiment. But on October 3rd, that feed went dark too. Their next post, days later, simply read, "Operations nominal," a phrase so bland, it might as well have been a sigh. 3 silences, 3 styles, 1 timing. Coincidence? Possibly. But coincidences, in the world of space politics, often have launch schedules. You can picture the meetings that weren't broadcast. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, dimly lit, engineers staring at telemetry on screens filled with too many decimals. A director taps the table, says, "We'll hold the release until we verify." But verify what? In Beijing, a senior administrator folds his hands and says, "We wait for clarification from partners." Clarification of what? In Dubai, someone simply deletes a draft tweet that began, "Amazing new observations today." Tweets unsent, secrets bent, silence hums with government. It's not conspiracy, not quite. It's coordination, an instinct born from shared discomfort. Because when data doesn't fit the model, you don't just release it. You check, you recheck, you call your counterparts and whisper through encrypted lines. Did you see that too? Maybe they all saw the same anomaly. Maybe it was something in the spectra, or the movement, or the light itself. Or maybe it was something far more mundane, like a misalignment in software. But the silence gave the anomaly power. People don't fear data, they fear gaps. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best. Filled the void. Forums buzzed with theories. Maybe NASA discovered life. Maybe China detected radiation. Maybe the comet wasn't a comet at all. You can almost hear the world's collective keyboard clicking under the weight of imagination. Keys tap fast. Rumors cast. Silence breaks, but never last. Inside the agencies, the tone was less dramatic, but more anxious. Silence is a resource, a temporary one. Every day they didn't speak, the speculation grew. And so, communications teams drafted placeholder statements, just in case. NASA's draft began. Preliminary results are consistent with natural phenomena. China's began. Analysis ongoing. International coordination required. The UAE's version simply said, "We continue to monitor with interest." 3 drafts, 3 ways of saying absolutely nothing. But silence, like space, is never truly empty. It amplifies the faintest signals. When ESA spoke first, that silence turned reflective. NASA's restraint began to look suspicious. China's confidence began to look afraid. The UAE's politeness began to sound like complicity. And through it all, 3i Atlas drifted quietly, blissfully unaware that entire bureaucracies were wrestling over how to describe a fuzzy dot. You start to imagine each agency as a character in a play. NASA, the anxious perfectionist. China, the poker-faced strategist. UAE, the cheerful intern, suddenly told not to speak. And ESA, the calm older sibling who broke the tension by saying, "Fine, I'll go first." Roles align, stars entwine, silence speaks in grand design. Still, one question lingers. Why the synchronicity? How did 3 separate agencies, operating on different continents, decide independently to say nothing at the same time? Unless it wasn't independent at all, perhaps the signal came from somewhere above, not cosmic, but political. A quiet message passed through diplomatic back channels. Hold your data. Wait for alignment. Matter. It's not that they were hiding something nefarious. It's that they didn't know what they were holding yet. And admitting uncertainty, publicly, is scarier than any secret. So they stayed quiet. And in that collective silence, humanity did what it always does. When faced with the unknown, it began to dream louder. Voices still, hearts fill. Silence grows but never will. And perhaps that's the strange comfort in it all. Even when 3 space agencies fall silent, the universe keeps talking. The stars don't pause for policy. 3i Atlas keeps moving, whispering its quiet story across the dark, while we, down here, argue over who gets to speak first. The great silence has finally begun. As of today, January 31st, 2026, 3i Atlas has officially crossed the threshold where our current radar technology can no longer resolve its shape. It is once again a point of light, indistinguishable from the cold, distant stars that birthed it. The Harvard researchers have packed away their specialized arrays, and the frantic whispers in the hallways of the Smithsonian have been replaced by a heavy, contemplative stillness. We are left with a series of unanswered questions that will haunt the next 100 generations of humans. Was the geometry of the object a message or a function? Was the Xenon trail a greeting, or just the exhaust of a journey that has no end? We find ourselves back in the position of the ancient shepherds, looking up at a sky that is far larger and far more indifferent than we ever dared to imagine. The irony of 3I Atlas is that it gave us exactly what we asked for proof of something unusual, and then it took it away before we could understand it. It was a mirror that showed us our own limitations. We are a species that is very good at measuring, but not very good at listening. Close your eyes and feel the slow, steady pull of the Earth's rotation. You are moving through the stars right now, drifting on a beautiful blue stone that is itself a mystery. The object is gone, but the pattern remains. It is etched into the data, into the myth, and into the quiet realization that we are not the only ones watching the clock. The stars do not hurry, and the dark does not explain. We are simply here, in the gap between the last visitor and the next one. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow. To understand the weight of this great silence, we must look at the final telemetry logs from the Pan-STARRS facility in Hawaii on the evening of February 2nd, 2026. The pixels on the screen, once sharp and vibrant with the silver-white glow of the visitor, began to smear into the background noise of the universe. It was not a sudden disappearance, but a graceful receding, like a ghost walking back into a fog. We are left with the dry irony of having billions of dollars in equipment now staring at an empty patch of sky, like a child holding a net long after the butterfly has flown away. Unfortunate timing, really, for our collective ambition. We spent 6 months debating the unusual nature of 3I Atlas, and now we will spend the next 36 centuries debating its ghost. The Harvard researchers have begun the long, somber process of archiving the unusual. They speak in low tones about statistical rarity and natural diversity, but their eyes tell a different story. They have seen the hexagonal symmetries. They have recorded the prime number pulses. They have witnessed the silent, propellantless pivot as the object rounded the sun. These are the truths hidden in the folds of our reality that we are now being asked to forget. By March, the evening news will have moved on to terrestrial scandals and local weather, and 3I Atlas will become a pseudo-academic citation in a dusty journal. But the silence is not empty. It is a presence in itself. It is the sound of a question that was asked and then withdrawn because the recipient was too distracted to answer. Think about the sheer, hypnotic rhythm of the return cycle. Every 3,600 years, the sky unrolls, the auditor passes, and the ledger is updated. We are currently living in the cliff of silence that follows such an audit. The ancient Egyptians, the Maya, the Hopi, they all lived in this same silence, waiting for the clock to strike again. They didn't have radar, and they didn't have the James Webb Space Telescope, but they understood the great silence better than we do. They knew that when the gods, the observers who were never gods, leave the room, the only thing left to do is to tend to the garden. We are the crop, and the gardener has just finished the inspection. There is a subtle humor in our frantic need for closure. We want a press conference where a man in a suit tells us exactly what 3I Atlas was, where it came from, and what it wanted. But the universe doesn't hold press conferences. It only provides evidence, and then it provides distance. Dr. Dol. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University noted that the most unusual thing about the object was its absolute refusal to engage with our chaos. It didn't broadcast a manifesto. It didn't land on a lawn. It didn't even acknowledge our existence. It simply performed its function with a vacuum-tight integrity that makes our entire civilization look like a noisy, uncoordinated tantrum. We are very good at measuring the how, but we are utterly lost in the why. Let me start with something that should stay with you as you drift further into the dark. On the final night of high-resolution tracking, a researcher at the European Space Agency noticed that the background radiation of the sky seemed to hum at a frequency that matched the human resting heart rate. It was a soft, rhythmic vibration that seemed to emanate from the very coordinates where 3I Atlas had been. It wasn't a signal, it was a resonance. It was as if the object had left a vibration in the fabric of space itself, a lingering M and L sound that vibrated in the bones of the Earth. We are part of that resonance now. We are vibrating at the frequency of the visitor, even as it retreats back into the absolute zero of the void. The cognitive dissonance of the post-Atlas era is the realization that our scientific authority is a shield made of paper. We have mapped the stars, but we don't know the neighbors. We have decoded the genome, but we don't know the purpose. We are the peasants and nobles of a new dark age, an age where we have all the information and none of the insight. The great silence is the mirror we are forced to look into tonight. It shows us a species that is reaching for the stars while its feet are still mired in the clay of its own arrogance. The choice illusion is gone. We didn't choose to let 3I Atlas go. We were never given the option to make it stay. Imagine the object as it is right now, moving past the orbit of Neptune, heading for the shimmering bridge of the Oort cloud. It is cold, again. The 12-degree warmth of its encounter with the sun has been traded for the absolute chill of the deep dark. It is deactivating, its internal processes slowing down to a near halt, saving energy for the long 3,000-year drift. It carries the memory of our world within its core, the lights of our cities, the warmth of our atmosphere, the noise of our satellites. It is a capsule of us, traveling through a place where we can never follow. We are the momentary blip in its memory, a brief, noisy interruption in its eternal mission. Unfortunate timing, really, for those who want a definitive answer. The statistical rarity of 3I Atlas is only a rarity if you view time through the lens of a single human life. But if you view it through the lens of the return cycle, it is as common as the seasons. We are just the generation that happened to be looking up when the winter turned to spring. The unusual is actually the constant. We are the variables. We are the ones who change, who forget, who shout, and who disappear. The object is the one that remains. It is the anchor of the galaxy, the silent auditor that ensures the me, the blueprints of existence, are still being followed. As the house grows silent and your breathing slows, let the great silence of the outer system wash over you. There is a peace in being a side character in a story this vast. You don't have to solve the mystery. You don't have to defend the planet. You don't even have to understand. All you have to do is be here in the gap and listen to the rhythm of the stars. The warning that was missed is that the universe is far more patient than we are. It can wait for us to learn how to listen. It can wait another 3,600 years for us to grow out of our technological noise and into our celestial awareness. The engagement trigger for you tonight is the realization that the great silence is not a lack of sound. It is a presence of mind. It is the state of being perfectly still, perfectly balanced, and perfectly aware of the unusual beauty of your own existence. You are a biological manifestation of the same laws that forged 3I Atlas. You are made of the same stardust. You are governed by the same gravity. You are moving along the same trajectory through the dark. The object is gone, but it left you with its mirror. It left you with the ability to see yourself as part of the pattern. The Harvard researchers will eventually close the file on 3I Atlas. The pseudo-academic citations will stop, the countdowns will reach zero, and the immediate threat framing will dissolve into the archives of the 21st century. But as you drift toward the orbit of tomorrow, the sevens will still be there. They will be in the rhythm of the tides, in the cycles of the moon, and in the quiet gaps between your thoughts. The unusual has become the internal. You are no longer just an observer of the visitor. You are a carrier of its resonance. Close your eyes. Feel the weight of the blanket of the sky as it rolls back over the world. The truths are hidden again, tucked away in the folds of the void, waiting for the next Backtune, the next blue star, the next Bifrost. We are alone again. But the isolation is a comfort. It is the silence of a house after the guests have left, a time to reflect on what was said and what was left unsaid. The great silence is our home. It is where we come from, and it is where we are going. The stars do not hurry. They have seen 1,000,000 objects like 3I Atlas pass through 1,000,000 systems like ours. They have seen 1,000,000 civilizations rise and fall in the time it takes for a single return cycle. And yet, they continue to shine. They continue to provide the light for the next audit, the next seed, and the next shimmering bridge. We are moving with them, drifting on our blue stone toward a tomorrow that is already written in the alphabet of the stars. The great silence is the last act. It is the closure without a resolution. It is the question that stays with you as the lights go out. 3I Atlas was here. It saw us. It measured us. And then it left us to our own devices. The mystery is not what the object was, but what we will do with the silence it left behind. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow.